Good morning. This is your English for Tuesday, the 2nd of February. Your LC is Can I Use Poetic Devices? Firstly, let's remind ourselves of the features of poetry. Things we've looked at earlier in the year include alliteration, similes, personification, onomatopoeia, repetition, wordplay, carefully chosen vocabulary, rhyme, pattern, and sound, amongst others. What are these examples of? Eyes like a wolf, strong as a tiger, he was a machine, she sells seashells. Well, eyes like a wolf, like her, is a simile. Strong as a simile. He was a machine. She sells seashells, examples of alliteration, using the same sound for each word. On the following slides, I'm going to talk through some examples of different poetic devices which we have used already this year. This is more of a reminder for us. Alliteration is when the sound or letter at the beginning of each or most of the words in a sentence is the same. Alliteration is used in poetry to create many different effects. It can be used to create a greater and more interesting description of different themes, people, and objects. Some examples. Sally sells seashells by the seashore. All authors allow authority after midnight. Teresa tripped and tumbled tremendously over the tree. You say them quick enough to become tongue twisters. But you notice that we have the same sound or letter at the beginning of each or most of the words in a sentence. Repetition is when a certain word, sentence, or phrase is written more than once in a poem. Repetition is used in poetry to help make the poem more interesting and to help create patterns, depending on the word or phrase that is repeated. Repetition allows for more emphasis to be placed on certain themes, ideas, or objects. Here are some examples. Using a refrain in a poem, where a verse or phrase is repeated during different stages of a song or poem. Using a chorus in a poem. This is where a verse or phrase is repeated following each verse within a song or poem. For example, in an echo poem, the last word of each line can be repeated as a response in the next line. Onomatopoeia. This is when a word imitates its natural sound or suggests the sound a certain object makes. It is used in poetry to create a sound effect to make the description more expressive and interesting. For example, bang, crash, pop, smash, drip, buzz, tick tock, whoosh, wham, pow. Rhyme occurs when two words sound the same when spoken out loud. These words usually have the same ending sounds, however, they don't need to be spelt the same. Rhyme is used in poetry to create something interesting to read. It's used to create a pattern within a poem. Some examples: fright and night, would, hood, should, could, hail, pale, male and stale, air and fair, to and do, day and sway, pause and clause, bears and stairs. And of course, when we first learn poetry, rhyme seems to be the one poetic device that sticks in our minds. But you don't always have to rhyme in poetry, it's just one feature amongst many. Simile, figure of speech. Figurative language, when one thing is compared to another using the word like or as a, like a. Similes can be as descriptive as the writer chooses. They're used in poetry to give the reader a more descriptive and in-depth understanding about a particular object or person. Examples below: as busy as a bee, snug as a bug in a rug, runs like a cheetah, as white as a ghost. Synonym. A synonym is a word that has the same or similar meaning as another word. Synonyms can be found in a thesaurus, of course. Synonyms are used in poetry as well to be more graphic and to give a broader description. So instead of beautiful, you might use words like attractive, pretty, gorgeous, and stunning. Funny, you may use hysterical, humorous, amusing, entertaining. Student, you might use pupil, scholar, schoolboy, schoolgirl. Lazy, idle, sluggish, indolent, slothful. Of course, words like beautiful, funny, student, and lazy are fine to use, but when you're in year 6, you want to be broadening your horizons and using synonyms. Now, one link to our last slide, deliberately split them up because there's a difference in the words that we use, whether it's a simile or a metaphor. We've got to be really careful. A metaphor is a figure of speech which describes a place, object, or subject as something unlikely and uncommon. Metaphors are used in poetry to create an image of judgment and comparison in the mind of the reader. Let's look at some examples. Her eyes were glistening jewels. She is the sunshine which brightens up our day. The kids at school are all brains. In Andrew's eyes, Rebecca is the sun. He is my knight in shining armour. The world is a stage. Now, those are just some of the features. Firstly, I'd like you to reread First Day Jitters and Locks, just going back in our novel. Okay, so I admit that the first day of school I was so nervous. Okay, so I admit that the first day of school I was so nervous. Well, let's make it poetic. Nervous as a... think of something or someone that might be shy or nervous. You could have nervous as a frightened cat. And here we're using which particular poetic device? You should recognise it's a simile. As a. Now your task today, I've written down some sentences from the novel. I would like you to use one or more of the skills above in the video, and you can rewind and pause wherever you need to. I'd like you to make it poetic sounding. So Mr. Tushman was greeting students and parents in front of the school entrance. Maybe we could use a simile in there to describe Mr. Tushman, a metaphor even. You may use synonyms. Remember to use a thesaurus or an online thesaurus for that. You may use metaphor for it. You may wish to put some rhyme in there. Perhaps onomatopoeia, repetition, or alliteration. You could change the sentence, play with it. Imagine this sentence is yours to do what you wish with, as long as the meaning and the understanding is the same. I'm looking for the use of poetic devices to change the writing, but don't just stick to the same ones. If you use a simile in the first one, for example, use something different in the next one. Like, don't just use the same skill again and again. Try and vary it. Use the ones that we've discussed already. As a challenge, can you find any other examples in the novel that you'd like to change? You could focus on parts you've read recently, such as Trick or Treat. What poetic devices can you use?